You're in a room, could be a boardroom, a dinner table, a job interview, a conversation with someone you respect, and someone asks you a question, and before you even finish speaking, they have already moved on. Not because you were wrong, not because you were unintelligent, but because something in the way you carried yourself, the way you chose your words, the way you responded, told them, without you ever knowing it, that you were not someone they needed to take seriously. That moment stays with you. It should, because what happened in that room was not an accident of circumstance. It was the result of a language pattern, a behavioral signature that you have been unconsciously running your entire life. And today that changes. My name does not matter. What matters is what you are about to learn. And if you stay until the end of this video, I promise you this, you will walk out of your next important conversation as a fundamentally different presence in that room. Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire in human history. He commanded armies, settled disputes between nations, and determined the fates of millions of people. And yet, in his private journals, he wrote only about one thing: control. Not control over other people, not control over outcomes, not control over outcomes, not control over himself. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The Stoics understood something that almost no one in the modern world has been taught. The person who controls how they respond controls the entire dynamic of any room they enter. Think about the people you respect most, the ones whose opinion genuinely matters to you, the ones who, when they walk into a space, something shifts, attention sharpens, voices lower, people listen. Ask yourself, when was the last time you saw one of those people scramble to answer a question before they were ready? When was the last time you saw them argue out of ego? When was the last time you saw them give ground on something they believed in just to avoid tension? You did not, because that is not what high-status people do. High-status people speak with intention. They move with deliberateness. They understand that language, chosen carefully, is not just communication. It is positioning. Today, we are going to examine 5 specific phrases rooted in Stoic principle that, when internalized and deployed correctly, will fundamentally change how other people experience your presence. These are not scripts, these are not tricks, they are philosophical commitments, externalized through language. Let us begin. D1. I'll need to think about that. Epictetus, a man who was born a slave and became one of the most influential philosophers in history, said this: "It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Say those words out loud right now, quietly, to yourself. Feel what they require of you. They require you to resist one of the most powerful social pressures a human being faces, the pressure to perform intelligence on demand. Here is the pattern that destroys most people's status in conversations, and almost no one is aware of it. Someone asks a question, and before the last syllable has left their mouth, you are already answering. Not because you have thought it through, but because silence terrifies you, because you have been conditioned to believe that pausing means you do not know, that hesitation signals weakness, that a fast answer proves intelligence. It does not. A fast answer proves anxiety. Think about every lawyer you have ever watched handle cross-examination, every CEO you have ever seen in a press conference under pressure, every military general giving a public statement after a crisis. None of them rush, because they understand at a deep level that the person who controls the pace of a conversation controls the conversation. When you say, "I'll need to think about that," you are communicating several things simultaneously, without ever saying them explicitly. You are saying, "My decisions carry weight." You are saying, "I do not owe you a performance." You are saying, "I operate on my timeline, not yours." How to apply this in your life the next time you are in a meeting, a negotiation, a difficult personal conversation, and someone asks you something that feels like pressure. Stop. Take one breath, then say calmly, without apology, "I'll need to think about that," and then say nothing else. Watch what happens. Watch the dynamic shift. Watch how the other person recalibrates how they approach you in that moment and in every moment after. The Stoics called this the art of the pause, the deliberate refusal to be reactive, and it's one of the single most powerful signals of personal authority that a human being can display. Drop in the comments right now, type the words, "I move on my timeline." If that phrase resonated with you, if you have ever felt the pressure to answer before you were ready, let me know you are here. Let me know this is landing. D2, what I'm hearing you say is, the Roman philosopher Seneca wrote, "Most powerful is he who has himself in his own power." Now, I want you to think about the last truly meaningful conversation you had. Not a transaction, not a briefing, a real conversation where you genuinely felt that the other person understood you. How rare was that? This is the uncomfortable truth of the modern world. Most people are not listening. They are waiting. They are waiting for a gap in your words so they can insert theirs. They are preparing their response before you have finished making your point. They are nodding while constructing their counter-argument. And people feel this, even when they cannot name it. They feel it. When you say, "What I'm hearing you say is," and then you accurately reflect what someone has just communicated to you, you do something extraordinary. You make them feel seen. Do you understand how rare that is? Do you understand what it does to a person to be genuinely heard, perhaps for the first time in a long time? It creates loyalty. It creates trust. It creates the kind of relational capital that no LinkedIn connection request or business card has ever built. But here is the Stoic dimension of this phrase that most people miss entirely. It also protects you, because before you respond, before you commit your position, you have confirmed that you actually understand what is being asked of you. You have eliminated the most common cause of conflict in human relationships, the assumption that you understood when you did not. How to apply this in your life, in your next difficult conversation, whether it is with a partner, a colleague, a client, or someone who has hurt you. Before you respond, say, "What I'm hearing you say is," and then reflect their point back to them, not sarcastically, not defensively, with genuine curiosity. And watch how the entire emotional temperature of that conversation changes. I want you to type in the comments, "I listen to understand, not to respond." If you have been in a conversation where you felt genuinely heard or genuinely unheard, tell me about it below. These comments create a community, and this community is built on people who are choosing to operate differently. PHRH3. That's not something I'm willing to compromise on. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Never esteem anything as of advantage to you that will make you break your word or lose your self-respect." There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from constantly negotiating your standards downward, from saying yes when every part of your internal compass is screaming no, from giving ground on things that matter to you, not because you were persuaded, but because the social discomfort of holding your position felt too costly. If you have ever done this, and you have, you know the price. It is not paid in that moment. It is paid weeks later when you look at the outcome and realize you compromised on something you should have protected, when you realize the person you gave ground to has now learned exactly where your limits are, and they are smaller than you wanted them to be. Boundaries are not aggression. They are architecture. They are the structural walls of your identity. And people who cannot see your walls will walk through you. The power of this phrase is in its complete lack of apology. It does not say, "I'm sorry, but I can't do that." It does not say, "I really wish I could, but..." It says, "That is not something I am willing to compromise on." Willing, that word is doing enormous work, because it communicates that this is not an inability, it is a choice, and choices made from principle carry a completely different energy than limits imposed by circumstance. How to apply this in your life? Identify, right now, before this video ends, 3 things in your life that you've been compromising on, that you should not be. Standards in your relationships, standards in your business dealings, standards in how you allow people to speak to you. Write them down. Give them names. And the next time one of those things is tested, say the phrase calmly, without volume, without anger, and then say nothing else. Drop in the comments, "My standards are non-negotiable." If you have ever given ground on something you should have held and paid for it later, I want to hear from you. Type it below. You are not alone in that. I could be wrong, but here's my thinking. Epictetus wrote, "Seek not the good in external things. Seek it in yourself. And embedded in that teaching is a truth about confidence that the modern world has completely distorted. Here is what most people believe about confidence: that it shouts, that it is certain, that it refuses to consider alternatives, that it doubles down. That is not confidence. That is insecurity performing certainty. Real confidence, the kind that moves rooms, that builds trust, that makes people genuinely follow, is the confidence that does not need to be right. It only needs to be honest. When you say, "I could be wrong, but here's my thinking," you accomplish something counterintuitive. You become more persuasive, not less, because you have removed the defensive wall between your idea and the other person. You have invited them into your reasoning rather than presenting your conclusion as a demand. The Stoics called this intellectual humility, and they considered it one of the highest virtues. Not the false humility of people who constantly self-deprecate to seem approachable. Genuine openness to being mistaken, because a person who is genuinely open to being wrong is also genuinely engaged with being right, and people feel that distinction immediately. How to apply this in your life? The next time you are making a proposal to a partner, a client, a team, begin with this phrase. Watch how it disarms resistance. Watch how people lean in rather than brace for impact. Watch how the quality of the conversation that follows changes entirely. Type in the comments, "I don't need to be certain, I need to be honest." And tell me, have you ever been in a room where someone's certainty killed the conversation before it even started? I want to read your experiences below. A5. I appreciate that, and here's my perspective. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Praise number 5, and possibly the most sophisticated of all 5. I appreciate that, and here's my perspective. This phrase requires something that most people are simply not trained to do. It requires you to acknowledge another person's position, genuinely, without sarcasm, without condescension, and then hold your own. In most conversations, disagreement is handled in one of two ways. The first, capitulation. You hear their position. It feels socially easier to agree, and you fold. You sacrifice your perspective to avoid tension, and you walk away feeling smaller than when you arrived. The second, confrontation. You hear their position. You feel threatened by it, and you attack. You debate. You escalate. And even if you win the argument, you have lost something more important: the respect of a person who now knows that disagreement destabilizes you. Neither of those is control. Control is this: hearing a position that differs from yours, honoring it genuinely, not performatively, and then calmly, without defensiveness or aggression, offering your own perspective. I appreciate that is not submission. It is social precision. It disarms the other person's defensive posture. It signals that you are not threatened by their view, and because you are not threatened, you do not need to fight. And because you do not need to fight, you lead. How to apply this in your life? In your next disagreement, do not brace for impact. Do not prepare your counterargument while they are still speaking. Listen fully. Then say, "I appreciate that, and here's my perspective." And speak from a place of stillness. You will not always change their mind, but you will always leave the conversation having preserved your dignity and your authority. And in the long run, that is worth more than winning any single argument. Drop in the comments right now, "I acknowledge, I don't surrender." Tell me, which of these 5 phrases are you going to start using this week? Number them. I read every single comment on this channel. The truth, presence. Now we arrive at what these 5 phrases were never really about. They were never about words. Language is a vehicle, and what these 5 phrases carry, what they are built to transport into every room you enter, is a single quality that the Stoics spent their entire philosophical tradition trying to cultivate: presence. Not loudness, not dominance, not aggression or performance or the constant need to be acknowledged. Presence, the quality of a person who has so thoroughly come to terms with who they are, what they value, and where they are going, that none of the ordinary social pressures of a conversation can move them off their foundation. Marcus Aurelius sat in the most powerful seat in the ancient world, And he wrote privately in his journal that the greatest battle he fought every single day was not on a battlefield. It was internal. It was the battle to remain composed, to remain clear, to remain himself. When the world was constantly pushing him to be reactive, to be defensive, to be something smaller than his values demanded. That is the real work. Not memorizing phrases, not performing authority, but building slowly, deliberately, through practice, the kind of inner architecture that makes everything else unnecessary. When you are genuinely at peace with your decisions, you do not rush to justify them. When you are genuinely secure in your value, you do not scramble to prove it. When you are genuinely clear on your boundaries, you do not raise your voice to defend them. That is what these phrases point toward, a version of yourself that is not reactive, not desperate, not shaken, composed. The ancient Stoics used a metaphor for the ideal human character, a fire that burns steadily, not easily extinguished by wind, not wild enough to consume itself, but constant, controlled, reliable. That is the standard, not perfection, not invulnerability, but the daily disciplined commitment to responding rather than reacting, to choosing rather than defaulting, to speaking with intention rather than noise. I want you to drop one final thing in the comment. Type the phrase that resonated most with you today, one of the 5, and tell me, what situation in your life does it apply to right now? Because the person reading this is not average. The person who makes it to this point in a video about self-mastery is someone who is genuinely building something. And I want to hear from you. If this video gave you something, share it with one person in your life who needs to hear it. Subscribe. Hit the bell icon, because we are just getting started. And if you want to go deeper, the next video is already waiting for you.